After days of building, the nighttime air was tense, like a hurricane preparing to hit. Jim Jones, a man who had always been motivated by love, but who was at his breaking point because his loyalty and trust had been frequently disregarded, was filled with anger tonight instead of love. It began like any other night after Jim had just finished a demanding workday that left him mentally and physically spent. He entered his house with the hopes of finding tranquility, looking forward to Chrissy, his fiancée, becoming warm. The house was disturbingly quiet, but Jim believed that their connection was strong despite everything they had been through together. Normally, he would hear Chrissy's voice, the TV or music playing, but now there was nothing. Chrissy. Jim's words reverberated around the silent house. As he approached the bedroom, his chest began to constrict with increasing uneasiness. Upon arriving at the door, it was ajar. The silence of it caused him to shudder. He reluctantly pushed it open. He was paralyzed by what he saw. Chrissy was in bed in the dark light of their bedroom, but her ex-boyfriend G. Harris was also there, tangled in the blankets with her. Jim had always known that G was a part of their past, but he still had faith in Chrissy. At least he believed. He did. It was a gut punch to see them so intimately connected, and he gazed at his mind, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. His trust in a flash, Chrissy's love was destroyed. Jim's voice was hardly raised above a whisper, but the impact of what he was saying seemed to tremble the walls. What the hell? His pulse pounded with rage that burned in his chest. Chrissy was shocked by his unexpected arrival and drew back, her eyes in terror. She hadn't anticipated him coming home, but Jim waited. "It isn't what it appears to be," she stumbled as she hurried to cover herself with the sheets. However, it was too late. The wound was created, and Jim was prepared to make no excuses. "Not right now, not what it seems," Chrissy had whispered. But Jim wasn't paying attention. He moved closer, his eyes blazing. "You're with him in bed. When I'm out working hard, Chrissy, this is your behavior." Still drowsy and confused, G. Harris sat up and rubbed his eyes in an attempt to make sense of the confusion all around him. His feeble attempt at speech just increased Jim's rage. Jim was impatient with G's remarks, the one who had previously been involved in Chrissy's past and stood as evidence of her treachery now. Yelling, "Get the hell out of my house, Jim." His words hung in the air, heavy with the intensity of the moment, his body shaking with rage, his hands locked at his sides, and his voice thick with raw passion. Jim halted to look at Chrissy for a clue as to what to do, but it was obvious from the fire in his eyes that there was no point in staying. Jay silently grabbed his belongings slowly and left without saying anything, as though he too understood the severity of the circumstance. Without turning around, he walked out of the room. Once teeming with life, the room now felt oppressive. Jim stood motionless, his heart clenched with hurt and treachery. Though the pain in his chest was excruciating, he was unable to take his eyes off Chrissy. What occurred, and how could she have hurt him like this? Chrissy was paralyzed, unable to look him in the eye while perched on the edge of the bed, unsure of how to mend what had been broken or what to say. "Please, Jim," she muttered, her voice wavering as she extended her trembling fingers. The justifications she had prepared feeling pointless now. Jim, however, retreated as though her contact might cause him to burn. "Please just hear me out," Chrissy pleaded, but her voice broke under the pressure of her behavior. "Hear you out?" Jim said. "You are in bed with him," in a voice that broke with agony. "Chrissy, how can I be expected to believe anything you say?" "Now?" His remarks vacillated between anger and grief. He exclaimed, "I trusted you. I gave everything to us, and this is how you repay me." With a wave of anguish and anger coursing through him, with all that was spoken, the ensuing stillness felt oppressively heavy. Jim's gaze swept over Chrissy's face, searching for any clue as to why she had been betrayed. But he saw only remorse. Her face was filled with tears. The woman he once loved is now a complete stranger. Deflated, her hand fell to her lap as though she understood nothing could undo the damage she had caused. What they had bonded over the years was in irreparable destruction. She could ask for forgiveness, but she knew in her heart that it wouldn't make a difference. "How could you do this to me?" Jim's voice cracked once more, this time gentler and more sorrowful. "We faced this together, and you threw everything away for him," Jim stated in a tone laden with incredulity. Chrissy opened her lips to reply, but nothing came out. How was she going to explain the awful treachery that resulted from a moment of reckless weakness that she now detested? Jim walked sluggishly toward the door. "I don't even know who you are anymore, Chrissy," he said in a distant, nearly empty voice. "I'm not sure I ever did." Each phrase pierced further into the remains of their once strong love, and they hung in the air like a last judgment. After giving her one final agonized look, he went, the door shutting behind him, leaving Chrissy to bear the crippling burden of her guilt. Outside, the storm erupted, releasing its wrath, and the wind started howling. However, Jim was already experiencing the real storm within himself. Jim avoided the house in the days that followed, which remained quiet and chilly. Chrissy. He was still in shock over the destruction of that night, and no matter how hard she tried to explain or make things right, the harm was too great. Jim had always believed in the power of forgiveness and second chances, but some hurts and betrayals are too deep to cure. Their love had vanished in an instant, leaving only the shattered remnants of what they had created. Once broken, certain things can never be repaired. Consequently, with a sorrowful heart and no precise responses, Jim turned his back on the woman he believed he would spend the rest of his life with. The future they had imagined together was now a dim memory, swept away by the fallout from her. Betrayal. Jim knew one thing for sure as he left everything they had built. When something breaks, it can never be mended. Tension was heavy in the night air, weighed down by a storm that had been. For several days, Jim Jones, a man who was frequently taken for granted in terms of devotion and confidence, was now on the verge of disintegrating. His passion and love had always been his driving forces, but now anger rather than love filled his emotions.
Bro.